Welcome again, fellow wanderers. It's me, Aeon, here once again with Eli to talk about Dream Forge and more specifically today, combat in Dream Forge and how it works. Some of you who've already seen our previous action, reaction, and reflex movement video are probably wondering why we're making another video about action economy type of stuff again. The long and short of it is watch time. We've had a few people ask us some more specific questions about how combat works in general, as well as how to run it in some of their own games and DMs, and are just curious in general about some things they might have missed option-wise or other core combat option-wise that they could bring into their experience. So in today's video, we're hoping to go over some of the various do's and don'ts of combat and rounds, how they work, and talk a little bit more in general about the flow of some of the more special aspects of Dreamforge's combat. Combat in Dreamforge is set up with various creatures and interactable objects, and what's called a turn order. For those of you that have played any type of tabletop RPG, you'll recognize a lot of these things. First off, for turn order, this is when you'll be able to tell who goes when, both for enemies, neutral, and on the player side. You'll determine who goes where in the turn order by rolling for initiative at the start of combat. An initiative is usually determined by a 1d20 dice roll, with the creature's added agility modifier, and in some cases some feats and special abilities might also add to this, granting them more apt readiness, so to speak. After these initiatives are accounted for, the DM will organize them from highest to lowest, sometimes grouping certain creatures under one initiative to make things a bit simpler or to make things go a bit quicker, depending on how many things are involved in a turn order. From there, the turns are taken by a creature when it's their turn in the initiative or turn order. Once all turns in a turn order have been completed, the round ends. A round is effectively all the turns in a turn order once they've been completed, and once this occurs, the turn order will repeat itself from the top of the initiative. There are some effects which also have durations lasting a certain amount of rounds as well, and besides this, on your own turn, you might have a variety of options to consider that happen to be round-based as well.
On a creature's turn, it has a standard 3 actions and 1 joint action. It can take any action adding up to that total, or forego some actions and end their turn earlier if desired. They may also delay their action, or turn off a specific activation. For example, I ready my action or turn until X thing occurs, or Y person acts, or Z party member attempts to flirt with the dragon again. You get the point. No matter what you do, you'll have to ensure you're using your turn well. In the previous actions, reactions, and reflex movement video, we pointed out several basic actions and joint actions that you can use, from making a basic attack, to channeling a spell, to raising a shield via the shields up action. While we won't name all of them here, we'll review a few core ones that will be important for the next major engagement of the video when we go through an example combat. The most common action taken when in combat is the attack or strike action. In some cases, it's called the armament attack action. The foundation for swinging a sword, shooting a gun, or channeling an effect with an attack roll is the same. This is what is called making an attack roll. The foundation is simple. Pick a target within your attack's range, a creature, an object, or a location. This target must be able to be seen, unless specified otherwise. Determine the attack modifiers. Your attack modifier is usually stated in the type of attack you are making, determined by the type of weapon you are using, or by the spell modifier from your class or lineage. If you are versed in the type of attack you are making, you add your verse bonus to the attack as well. The GM and you determine whether the target has cover, and whether you have any negatives or positives, favor or infamy against the target. In addition, spells, special abilities, and other effects can apply penalties or bonuses to your attack roll, or to any saves or checks if applicable. Make an attack roll. You make the attack roll rolling a d20 plus your attack modifiers. On a hit, you roll damage, unless the particular attack has rules that specify otherwise. Some attacks cause special effects that have saves, checks, or some condition in addition to or instead of the base weapons or spells damage. An attack using weapons or items usually uses physical traits like your vitality, agility, or sometimes your vigor, whereas a channeling attack uses your more spiritual traits like cognition, will, or lore. Within an armament attack, the different types of weapons will dictate what you use. For example, a melee attack allows you to attack a foe within your reach. A melee attack typically uses a handheld weapon such as a sword, a quarterstaff, or an exalted blade. A typical creature makes a melee attack when it strikes with its physical prowess, things like fangs, claws, or a weapon. Another example is when you make a ranged attack. You usually use your agility modifier. This is when you fire a bow or a firearm, toss a javelin, or otherwise send projectiles to strike a foe at a distance. There are some features, such as the extra attack feature from the tactician, that allow you to make an additional attack as a part of the same action, incurring no multiple attack penalties on that specific action, which we'll get to in a moment. There are some attacks that do not use the simple attack actions and may require 2 or even 3 actions, making them full round actions. This is often seen in some heavier attacks or special equipment. Taking the attack action multiple times within the same turn incurs a penalty to the attack equal to -5 on the next attack action and -10 on the next attack action after, though there are some feats, class features, and abilities which can lower or even negate this penalty. If you are wielding a weapon with a deft property, the first penalty is a -4 and the second penalty is a -8. Unarmed attacks are not deft unless specifically stated to be so.
Before we go into looking at some examples of combat encounters and turns, there's a few important aspects of combat to consider as a new player. Some of these are common staples to many tabletop RPGs, like the first one that we're about to get into, but others are things you'll really want to pay attention to, as they are things that give Dream Forge its own unique flair and engaging moment-to-moment encounters. The first is mainly for the thrill and excitement, but also comes with a double-edged sword, so to speak. This is critical successes and critical hits, as well as by proxy, critical failures. A critical success occurs when you roll a 20, otherwise known as a natural 20, on a 1d20 dice, where you're rolling some type of attack roll to try to beat a target's AC, or potentially certain skill checks as well. The other way this can occur is if you get a 10 or higher above what you need for the DC or AC of a given thing. An example of this is if you would get 24 after modifiers on an attack roll against a target that has an AC of 14. This is considered a critical success or a critical hit. Specifically, when you get a critical success on an attack roll, you will re-roll the damage die for the attack and add it to the original damage amount that you rolled. There are also properties that can increase the total damage you can do on a critical hit, as well as the range you might need to roll, like a 19 or 18 for an example. Conversely, we have critical failures, however, which can occur in one of two ways. Cookie for the first one that gets this right. The first way is if you get a 10 or lower under the target's AC or DC, etc. Or, the second way, you roll a natural 1 on a 1d20 dice for an attack roll, saving throw, or etc. When you get a critical failure on an attack roll, you also deal damage to your held equipment. This is usually 1 point unless there's some other specified things happening, and if you're channeling a spell or an effect, you also deal damage to yourself, equal to your casting modifier plus the channeled spell's level in damage. This damage is also non-resistible. The next aspect of combat is targeting parts. You can target specific parts on a monster or machine through a core special form of combat or attacking, called sundering parts or targeting parts. You'll do this before you make your attack roll by asking the DM if there's any specific targetable parts on the creature, in which they can supply you several options. You then declare which part you are going to target, and continue to make your attack as normal with your weapon or spell, which targets only a single target and has an attack roll. On a hit, you deal a break point of damage unless you have some other special feature allowing you to deal more, or you critically hit, allowing you to do an additional breakpoint of damage. Once you reduce a targetable part to 0 breakpoints, the part is considered broken and wounded. This allows any target which then goes on to attack that targetable part again in the future the ability to do an additional amount of damage that is non-resistible, no matter what damage they are actually dealing with their attack. This normally affects a creature only once per turn, although there are some features and items which can increase the damage and rate, so look out for them. The last one that I will be sharing will be directional attacking. While I explain this section for directional attacks on the screen, it will be both flank attacking and back attacking for more detailed information about them. Depending on where you attack a creature from while within melee combat, and in some cases even within range combat, though you'll need additional feats and abilities for it, there might be additional effects on how an attack's damage or chances to actually deal damage work. In some cases, there are certain abilities and maneuvers which may require you to also attack from a certain direction relative to where the creature is facing. Or in some cases, certain bonuses might only activate while you are or another allied creature is around a certain section of the creature. First, terminology. The front refers to the front direction a creature is facing, denoted by usually an arrow or triangle on the token or wherever the DM tells you they currently are looking. The flank refers to the left or right side of a creature relative to the front-facing direction of them, and the blast place is the back, which is the space directly opposite of the front direction they are facing. How these locations are determined are usually done on the grid through a series of cones, usually extending out from the creature that you can kind of imagine, so to speak. Diagonals or interaction points between these two spaces are also something that is subject to the DM's whims when it comes to how it will matter for a flank or a back attack. Though if you're using a hexagonal grid, it is a lot easier to tell.
Saving throws are things which commonly occur in combat, and when you or a group of creatures are subject to an effect which tests your ability to resist or evade its effects. There are saving throws for vitality, agility, vigor, cognition, will, and allure. Some of these physical saves may require you to dodge around or steel yourself and stand strong, while the mental saves may require you to strengthen your mind and close out any wanted noises that will attempt to seep in. While it might not be your turn in combat, that doesn't mean there aren't things happening to you, nor that you can't act during this time. A vigilant adventure is an alive adventure, and if you want to stay alive, I suggest you heed this next part. During combat, you have access to a thing called reactions and reflex movement. These allow you the opportunity to functionally react and maneuver outside of your normal turn, depending on specific things others attempt to do to you. As outlined in the actions, reactions, and reflex movement video linked in above, you'll probably have a variety of things you can do to avoid damage from an attack, reduce its effect on you, or prepare for a counterattack. Read what the feature allows you to do, its activation information, and resource cost if it has any. The most commonly used reflex movement options that all Wanderers have as standard can be found in the Adventures Rules section.
Also, I was incorrect. There's one more core aspect of combat that I want to talk about before we get into the actual examples, and that's combat maneuvers. We're going to cover these again in another video where we talk about feats, maneuvers, and ability points, but just a real quick overarching view of what they are here. The way we describe Dream Forge's combat maneuver system is often comparable to things like a fighting game, for instance Tekken, or maybe a weapon and its combo systems you see in Monster Hunter. If you're familiar with either of those concepts, this should start to click very quickly for you. All Wanderers, yes that means you, have the ability to use these combat maneuvers regardless of their class or their level. All maneuvers use a resource called maneuver points to be able to actually do them as well. And all Wanderers have a maneuver point amount equal to 2 plus their verse bonus. And as you level up, of course, this will increase as your verse bonus does as well. There are also some classes that gain increased amounts of total maneuver points, and there are some abilities and features which can give you more maneuver points as you go through the experience. The basic understanding of a combat maneuvering sequence, or a combo sequence as some people have called it within our community, is as follows. A sequence begins in an initiator phase until you make an initiator move, which will put you into the transit or transitorial phase. As you're in this phase, you'll use other transitorial moves to gain what's called chain points. These chain points, once you collect enough of them, allow you to move to the next phase, or the final phase, of a combat maneuver chain, called a finisher. Using a finisher automatically puts you into the finishing state, and coincidentally ends or resets the actual combo sequence. Some finishers also require you to be in something called a tempo, which is like a certain type of kind of sway or mojo, you could say, along with their normal requirement of chain points to do. Usually the higher costing chain point finishers are also the more impactful ones as well. When you're in a certain phase, you can only You can only use moves that belong to that phase. But once you leave that phase, you can also not go back until you restart the combo, or automatically the combo ends after 1 minute of not attacking or being incapacitated. Now let's take a look at what we've learned today and apply it to a visual example here, shall we? Here is a simple round of combat between Lloyd the Tactician and a pair of bandits. First, both will roll initiative to determine the turn order. We'll record all the initiatives in that turn order from highest to lowest. Now that we've done that, we know that in our combat here, the bandit to the left will go first, followed by Lloyd, then followed by the last bandit over there on the right. The initial bandit, wanting to get a little surprise, throws a powder keg, or a fragmentation grenade, we'll just go with what's on the screen here, using one action. This forces Lloyd to make an agility saving throw to avoid the damage. Due to this being an area of effect attack, which does not move Lloyd forcibly or knock him prone, Lloyd is able to use the basic evading maneuver on the core reflex movement option after this attack occurs. Due to Lloyd being quite agile and vigilant, he manages to succeed in the saving throw, allowing him to take half the damage he would normally take, at 6 bludgeoning damage, and move up to 10 feet using his reflex movement after. Seeing that explosive trinkets won't really work on Lloyd, the bandit decides that he's going to get into melee range with him. He uses one action to move closer to Lloyd, and with his next action, which is also his last action, he draws his mace and then makes a single weapon attack against Lloyd. However, it seems to be a miss. The bandit is now out of main actions and has nothing but their joint action left, and unfortunately, they have nothing they can do with it at the moment. So their turn is finished, leading us to Lloyd. Lloyd doesn't need to move away from his target as he's right here in front of him, so he will draw his longsword and shield and make the attack using his longsword. Now Lloyd also has extra attack, at least for this example, so he will make 2 attacks with his single action here. His first attack rolls very well as as his next. Lloyd, however, wants to make an additional attack. Since this is a separate attack action, and it is a basic attack, he will need to roll with a -5 penalty, and every additional attack-based action after that will also incur this penalty on this single turn. The bandit goes down, it seems, and Lloyd will use his remaining action to use the shields up action, raising his shield to protect him slightly. He will also use his one joint action to drink a potion and give himself 10 additional health points to restore what he lost from the grenade. Note that had he been within reach of another hostile target, he would have also had taken opportunity of attack. Otherwise, he would have had to use one action to avoid that case. But since he's not, he doesn't need to worry about it. Now on to the last bandit's turn. His options are limited as he doesn't think he can get away from Lloyd, and thinks that, unlike his ally, he'll fare maybe a little bit better. He will use one action to move up to Lloyd, and use multi-attack, which is 2 actions for him. For his first attack, he rolls well, dealing damage to Lloyd. However, it is also reduced by Lloyd's raised shield, or the shields up action, if you remember. However, his second attack comes at Lloyd, and Lloyd decides to be a bit more proactive. This is where the responsive nature of Dream Forge's system comes in. As the second attack starts to go towards Lloyd, while it's not on Lloyd's turn, he has the ability to use reflex movement by doing certain types of maneuvers to get out of the way potentially. In this case, he has the options of combat rolling or combat diving. Lloyd has enough reflex movement to use the combat roll maneuver option, and in this case he's going to attempt using a deftness check to avoid the attack roll. Once again, Lloyd expertly shows that he is agile, and does so without a problem, beating the attack roll and rolling around the bandit, preparing to strike at his left flank. Now at this point, the bandit is out of actions, and Lloyd is ready to strike. It's a new round, and it's Lloyd's turn again, because now he is the highest in the initiative with the other bandit out of commission. His shield is no longer raised, as shields up only last until the start of your next turn, normally at least. But he's going to go on the full offensive, so it doesn't matter anyway. He'll go for an attack action, making another 2 attacks. His first one hits, dealing a sizable chunk of damage to the bandit. However, wanting to take this one in, alive, he'll use his second attack, but this time he'll go for a non-lethal strike. Lloyd still manages to just hit, dealing a sufficient amount of damage, using the back part of his blade to take down the bandit. Now that all the hostiles are down for the count, or are unwilling to continue, combat has ended. So, now that we've went through a basic example, let's now go through a few more other examples and styles of play, shall we? In this case, we have here Starsha, a guardian using a pair of dueling repeaters and getting ready to put the finishing touches on a mercenary and its Durga mount. She'll go after the mercenary first, however she's going to need to check if the mercenary is within her effective range, represented by the numbers and the range property of her dueling repeaters. It seems that it's within the first listed range, however had it been between the first and second ranges, she would be attacking at infamy, and if it had been past that, well, she wouldn't be attacking at all. She will then take the attack action to make a ranged weapon attack. However, instead of using her vitality modifier, as mentioned earlier, she'll be using her agility modifier for both the attack and damage roll. She rolls well, however, her weapon is out of ammunition after she fires. Let's just say she's been unloading into several mercenaries for the last 4 or so rounds. It's a very Starsha thing to do. And now she needs to reload her weapons. In this case, she has basic dueling repeaters, with no extra augments or anything on them, so she'll have a reload time of 1 action or a joint action. In this case, she's only used 1 action, so she decides she's going to use her other action to reload her weapon. However, she's not done using her guns yet. She has the quick draw property on her weapon, which allows her to use her joint action to fire at the Durga 1 more time. This attack is also unaffected by MAAP, allowing her a more easier shot. And she's going to decide to target the Durga's legs, to try to impair its movement, potentially. The DM checks the targetable part portion, and sees what the AC is. Starsha makes her attack, and she hits. Starsha's already been putting damage into this particular part, so on this hit here, the part breaks as she's in enough break points to reduce it to 0, and the part is now wounded, degrading the monster's capabilities as the part's now broken, and also providing a wound that will allow her, and others if they were here, additional damage if the part was struck again, for the first time on a turn. Let's say for the sake of showcasing another feature here, the Mercenary and Durga have some type of special reflex movement option, and they now rush up to her after she's made her first 2 shots here, and her reload. Now, she only has 1 action left, with a gung-ho Merc and a Durga looming over her. While not her only options, her first 2 that come to mind are an attempt to flee using 1 action to potentially move away, but she would take an attack of opportunity from both of them. The next option would be potentially to try to use her firearm again, or an unarmed attack. However, both of those options would incur a MAAP, or a multi-attack action penalty, due to her already having attacked. But Starsha's a pretty smart girl, and a resourceful one at that. She's got one ability that she's saved up, that she hasn't used yet, tied to her being a Galeful Tail. That is her Starstreak ability. She leaps forward into the air, using her massive-ass tail, to send a cascading wave of cosmic energy towards both the Durga and the Merc. Suffice to say, both roll extremely poorly, and are too weak to survive the attack, as she rolls well enough to fell them both, leaving both the Merc and the Durga limp with cosmic burns on the ground, before walking away with more important things to spend her day with. In this next example, let's set up a little situation here, with Cathor, who is a mystic, in a similar situation to how Lloyd was before, surrounded by a few bandits. In this situation, it's her turn, and she wants to channel a spell that's going to hit everyone here, and keep them away from her. She decides to go with a crowd control spell called Entangle Earth. This costs 2 actions instead of 1 action, is considered an attack action type still. It forces the bandits to make a vitality saving throw to avoid the writhing vines erupting from the ground. However, they all fail, and are restrained and ready for capture by Cathor. Now Cathor also has 1 action left. She could use to move, or even attack again if she wants. However, since she cast a spell, it is considered an attack action, as was said earlier, and would incur MAAP on any additional attack action this turn. Additionally, she can't cast another spell as she's already cast one this turn. However, she could do a cantrip if she had one that only cost an action to do, but it would still also incur the MAAP if it was an attack roll.
Finally, in our last example, you have Magellan, who will be going up against an Udor. He's a blast gladiator, and he has a sequence of moves he wants to go through to take down this creature. He wants to eventually do the finisher Explosive Payload. To do so, he will need to be in Gunslinger's tempo and get 4 chain. It is his turn, and first he begins in the Initiator phase. He will use 1 action to make what seems to be initially a regular melee attack with his Blast Armament Spear. However, Blast Gladiator has a special interaction when you hit a target called Booming Trigger, shown on the screen now. He will use 1 maneuver point to turn it into an Initiator maneuver, getting him 2 chain points as the target fails the saving throw. He is now in the transit phase and wants to get all the chain he'll need for his next turn now. He goes for another attack, but the MAAP makes his shot go wide with the penalty and he misses. He's got 1 action and 1 joint action left, but he knows next round he'll need at least 2 actions for his finisher, which means he must use this last moment here, or he has to be ready for it next turn. He ponders and realizes he's got 1 trick left up his sleeve. He'll go for a special attack that can get him a quick chain at a higher maneuver cost for the attack. It'll also give him some distance if he wants to, though it comes with the attack of opportunity. He uses a quick draw shot as it is unaffected by MAAP, giving him the chance he'll need. He capitalizes on it, shifting away and taking a headbutt to the shin from the Udor, but manages to get a nice shot, drawing his revolver with his other hand, hitting the creature and getting his needed chain. The Udor tries to close the distance using an action to move up, and then following that with a charging headbutt, but unfortunately deals minimal damage as Magellan expertly dives out of the way, landing prone as he uses the combat dive maneuver to get more distance and to reduce the damage. Magellan's turn once more, and now he's ready to send the Udor packing. He uses 1 action, a move action, and stands up using half his movement to do so. Then loads his special shot and uses 2 actions to perform his Explosive Payload finisher. It costs him 5 maneuver points as well, but he's got just enough ready. The Udor attempts to avoid the attack, but critically fumbles, taking the brunt of the explosion damage from the attack, and is slain by Magellan, who sways over, blowing the smoke out of his gun's barrel, now having completed a combo maneuver chain. That was a look at basic combat in Dream Forge, and hopefully it can help you get a firmer grasp of how things on a regular level work.
We'd like to thank you all for watching the video and remind you to like the video, to subscribe to the channel, and share us around as we are looking to grow the community. It would help us a great deal if you followed our Kickstarter page and checked out our Linktree, where you can see our art and various updates on our Twitter, Insta, and Blue Sky. If you want to try the game out for yourselves, or just stop by and say hi, join our official Discord, linked in the description box below. We hope to see you in the future, and again, thank you for all for watching, and see you Wanderers in the next video.